If a general manager is focused on that experience, the guest reviews will follow. I can assure you almost 100%.
Welcome to Back of House Banter, everyone, today. So we're really excited. We've got Booking.com with us and we've got Leanne Singer. So I'm going to introduce you to everyone. So we have Rodica, and she's Project Marketing Director for Booking.com. And she's going to be explaining some of the changes that are going on at Booking.com and how that's going to impact you guys as hoteliers. And then just to put the hotelier side really across, we asked Leanne Singer to join us. Now she is Wonder Woman in the hospitality industry in South Africa. So she is Director of Marketing for the Singer Group, and she's also Chairperson of FEDHASA Western Cape. So we're going to kick it off with Rodica today. So the most obvious question is, what has Booking.com changed and why?
First of all, it's lovely to be here with both of you today. Thank you for taking the time and thank you for inviting me. Yes, we're really excited about a change we just introduced at the end of January. It's a topic very near and dear to everyone's hearts, guest reviews. So we're literally changing the math, the logic behind how we compute your overall property level score, and making it a bit more dynamic, weighing it by recency, so counting those more recent reviews a bit more. But yes, I think it's a change that makes a lot of people a bit nervous because it's such a core KPI to the business. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come speak to you a bit more, kind of answer some questions that I know we collected, and hopefully kind of demystify this change and how it's going to impact properties.
I'm sure you've had lots of questions from everybody, so this is a great platform. I think, Leanne, you will have been seeing that firsthand across the Singer Group. Has that affected you in any way, positive or negative, or is there any you would like to put forward just to clarify from your point of view on the changes?
I think to set the scene, being a hotel operator and then representing a large chunk of the hospitality industry in South Africa, what I would like at the end of this call is to walk away with a handbook, the idiot's guide, best practice in terms of these are the changes that Booking.com has made. This is how me running my business on a daily basis, this is best practice to ensure that I benefit from these changes that I've made, because Booking.com would not have made these changes if they didn't think that it would be good for their clients and good for our guests. So for me, that would look like success at the end of this call, is if we can go back to the industry, I can go back to my GMs and my marketing team, my guest review team, and make sure that these are the best practices for me to make the most of these changes.
So with the current changes then, Rodica, what has essentially changed? Obviously, you're weighting it on recency and those sorts of things at the moment. And we've seen that's always been the case with the sites like TripAdvisor. So what made Booking.com do that change? Is it to kind of catch up with everybody, all the OTAs? Is it making it more fairer across those sites?
I think it started with a lot of accommodation feedback that our guest review score was really hard to change. So a lot of properties were trying to bump up their score to get into some of our preferred Genius programs, for example, which have a cutoff rate for guest review score. But also we've had a lot of accommodations that have been with us for many years, and their score just behaved like it was mostly static. So we knew this from partner feedback, basically, that there was something lacking in how our score performed. And in terms of being fair, of course, we're trying to be fair, but also like over the years, we evolved from serving only hotels to serving home properties and, multinational chains. So the system has to also change to adapt to how the market is today, right? You have a score that's mostly designed to work for large properties with lots of reviews all throughout the year, and it needs to adjust to the type of properties that we have today. And it needs to behave in a fair way, both for the accommodation and the traveler. So that's sort of the reason why we made this change. And the guest review topic has been the one that partners have been most vocal about over the years, and that it needs changes. So this is This is not all the change that you can expect from Booking.com, but it's us stepping into trying to make this system a bit better for everyone.
So just to kind of go back and discuss the changes, like, so we've seen like a static score. So if you were 9.3, the chances of you moving from 9.3 are very slim. So have you seen that hoteliers are concerned that they're going to go from 9.3 and then drop radically and see a lot more changes quite quickly in their scoring?
I think what I'm seeing and what we're advising partners to do is to keep an eye on that score, because if you're used to that KPI staying mostly static, then you will be surprised that it will start to kind of ebb and flow a bit more as you get more recent reviews. But in general, I would say the changes once the new score went live have had a pretty normal distribution. So about 50% of our partners, globally speaking, have had no change. And then you have like folks that have an increase and folks that have a decrease on the other side. And those decreases are, like, by and large, small. And now when I'm speaking small, I'm speaking mathematically, but a 0.1, 0.2 change can obviously mean very big things for a partner. But that's where most of the change comes in. It's fairly small. And then you have a very small percentage of partners globally, like 4 or 5%, that will see a larger decrease or increase than that. So it's sort of the outliers of the of the distribution. So that's what we've been seeing once we roll out the score. Yeah.
Rodica, if I can ask you, you're saying that the outliers are seeing such a big jump, 4 to 5%. Why is that?
Yeah, it has to do with that recency. So before, our formula was very simple. It was a straight up average. So you can see over 3 years, that straight up average kind of keeps things fairly consistent. But if your guest experience has changed and you're getting better or worse reviews, once you add that recency component, you can see potentially a slight or a big shift, right? The thing that we've always told partners throughout our pilots and speaking to them about this change is that that's just the change at launch time. So that's just the deltas that we've seen when we launched this at the end of January. We've also seen partners pretty quickly be able to lift that score. So we've seen folks be able to change their score in like 2 to 3 months on average.
So what is your recommended kind of tip for a hotelier to increase that score? Get more reviews, I'm assuming. Get more positive reviews.
And I mean, if you're trying to lift your score, that's basically how you do it, right? And focus on those recent stays. Listen, I know hoteliers do incentive programs. They're technically against our terms of service, but I know they exist. The way that I've seen this successfully is to kind of still think of reviews as being optional and being the choice of the traveler, and making that connection to say, hey, I'm running, especially if you're a small business, I'm running this business. If you really enjoyed your stay, I would really appreciate, so make it a bit more personal when you're asking for that review. So it doesn't just come from this, organization that's faceless and doesn't have that personal kind of touch. And then I think the advice that I have, that I've seen partners do really well, is really avoiding negative reviews by having that conversation during the stay. So making sure you're checking in on that guest as they're staying there to see how they're doing. And then also be culturally aware. So some people are great about giving you negative, positive feedback in the moment. Other cultures may not be so forthcoming. So there's one hotel in the UK, I believe, that talked to us and said, we put in a WhatsApp program in place so that we kind of ask people almost anonymously so that they don't feel like they're giving this rejection to the person that's front of house. They can send it over text. They don't need to go be personally confrontational with someone. And then what that does is, you're getting that feedback in a moment. It comes directly to you. It doesn't impact the score. And also that person has an avenue to vent, which is like, it's more likely, I think, on average, for someone to kind of feel the frustration and want to vent in the reviews. If you can find a way to channel that directly to your staff, monitor it, have immediate kind of ways to solve that pain point, you can actually turn someone from having a bad experience to having a great experience at the end, without ruining their vacation and waiting to hear back at the end of it, right? So that's been, I'm surprised more people don't do that, to be honest. If you expect people to just come up and speak to the front of house and tell them bad news, I have news for you. A lot of travelers, especially if you're getting international travels, will not want to do that confrontation. So find ways to get it using technology. Yeah.
It's quite funny, you know, like speaking to you, who's an OTA and at Booking.com, and I'm from obviously guest review, and we're a guest feedback solution. You know, you own the user journey in so many ways because they've done that booking through you. They're going to get an email asking them for feedback, and it's really great to hear Booking.com say, you know, find a way to get that feedback before we ask for it, so you can fix it. Leanne, how are you doing that across your properties at the moment?
We go by it very old school, real old hotelier style, and then we try and incorporate tech as well, because as you correctly pointed out, we need to be able to give people access to speaking to us in the way that they prefer. So some people want to be able to walk downstairs, they know the general manager's office is there and they want to go speak to them, right? So I am so proud to say that I have general managers who spend most of their days on the floor, right? I'm very confident that our general managers, they get their thrills out of meeting their guests, seeing who their guests are, and making sure that their guest experiences are on par with what our brand has offered. So we use the person-to-person contact, and I must also say, those of you who know me, I do not have an office, right? I work from the hotel lobby wherever I can, because I also want to have that connection and preempt a problem when I see it. So definitely the human connection, if that's how guests want it. And then we use WhatsApp extensively, and that is for pre-check-in, during their stay and after their stay. And after their stay, obviously we have guest review, but we have lots of tools that helps us communicate with the guests before, and then obviously the vital upselling. And then while they're in house, once they've checked in, to make sure that they're comfortable, and post stay. So we've really embraced what's the buzzword? Omni-channel communication, to ensure that our clients are communicated in the way that we want. We have a diverse portfolio. As I mentioned, on the one end, we have a campsite, right, where you go with your tent. And the other end, we have a high-end luxury hotel. The communication and the type of clients are very different in between. Yeah, so we like to cater to them in the way that they want to.
Awesome. So I do actually have a question for you, Rodica. As a company, we say that, you know, you should be responding to all your online reviews, because, you know, it's not necessarily about the guest that stayed and left that review. It's about the potential guest that's going to read the review after and make that decision. So is Booking.com taking that into account for hoteliers that are responding to reviews, and for ones that aren't? Is that able to impact their score at all?
I think it's best practice to sort of address and respond to guest reviews. Today, I'm not here to announce to you or to partners that we're making any change there, but it's something that we've heard about, right? Today, the benefit of a partner spending time answering reviews is that when that traveler that's trying to book you and that's trying to decide between your property and another one sees bad reviews, and I know I have friends who always go to the bad reviews first, just to kind of see what's the worst that they can expect from a hotel or a property that they're trying to book. I also look to see if those traveler reviews sound reasonable, or if it's something that I would complain about. And then to me, it matters if the property also chimes in to say, hey, we know about your issue. We try to address it with you during your stay. So just that best effort of ensuring that guest experience sometimes matters more to a traveler than you like solving it, or, you know, addressing it right there. So a bad review isn't necessarily dissuading a potential traveler for coming to join you. So anyway, today we're not making any changes in that area, but it is something that we've heard a lot. And I think as we see companies like yours, Amy, stepping in to help hoteliers or properties with guest reviews, you know, how do you reward accommodations for spending the time on that piece. So we are hearing it quite a lot. So keep an eye out for future announcements if we ever do decide to make something in that area.
And I think the nice thing about working with Booking.com, and Leanne will attest to this, is that through the API connection with Guest Review and Booking.com, you can respond directly in your app. So you're not having to log into Booking.com every single time. You know, we're working together as a partnership to try and make that as easy as possible for hoteliers. And I'm sure Leanne can tell you, you know, roughly how much time that would save and how much easier it makes that experience for the hotelier.
100%. It's life-changing. Not just in terms of productivity, but it's just plain bad manners not to respond. A guest who has spent money with you, who you welcomed in your home, essentially, right? Hospitality, you welcomed them in your home. Imagine taking somebody's money, they've stayed in your hotel, they then took the time to go and comment. It's just plain bad manners not to respond. That to me is such a disconnect in the guest journey, and for me personally, so off-brand and just really reeks of smugness and bad service. I'm quite intolerant when it comes to that. But now I've made it easy for my general managers, right? Because there's one central platform where they can go and easily, without many pain points, go and solve these problems. But I have a question, Rodica, that with the new Booking.com system, how do I, as a property, how do we correctly convey the guest sentiment in terms of their experience? I can have a really crappy property in the middle of the city, but the staff were so amazing that it made up for everything. Or I can have a high-end luxury hotel, but the Wi-Fi wasn't working. And because I paid $1,000 a night, I'm really put out because the Wi-Fi wasn't working. How do I, as a hotel operator, how do I work the system to ensure that this doesn't penalize me now?
The examples you've given are more kind of one-off things that happen, right? Like nothing is perfect all the time. The Wi-Fi can go off for whatever reason. So you address it by answering that question, and also by the fact that this review score will eventually redress once you go back to getting your usual positive scores. So we've also worked the score so that it's not like if you just get one bad review from that one person that was super upset that they paid $1,000 and the Wi-Fi was down, and you're getting generally get very good reviews. That one outlier shouldn't bring down your score.
Okay.
Plus the recency weight should allow whatever dip you do see should be rectified right away. We really made it so a single bad review or a couple of outliers shouldn't destroy the experience. The experience an average person comes and has at your property. The other thing that I would say is we've also had questions about if there's something completely out of your control, like the elevator was broken for a month. Is there a way? Partners have been asking us, is there a way to sort of mark it as an event and maybe exclude those? I think it's an interesting idea that I've taken back to the product team. No news on that front yet, but I think it's an interesting, challenge. If you can sort of explain that, during that 1 month you've had construction, you had a known issue, it was on your site, on your property details, you tried to communicate it to travelers, you've done all the right stuff, but you're still getting these negative reviews because of this incident. Is there a way to sort of kind of whitelist that period and maybe not include it in your guest review? So I'm mentioning it as an idea and something that we've heard as a feature request. It's not there today, but it's something that we're looking at as well.
The top tip there is always make sure that your Booking.com listing is always updated. If there are issues, if a guest books, they're going to see them firsthand. So be upfront about them. Let them make that decision. Maybe you drop your rate a little bit to alleviate the stress that not having an elevator is going to be about. But then, you can put it back up later on. Just be honest. Guests get unhappy when you're not honest with them about the experience that they've read and they believe that they're going to get as soon as they start that journey with you. That would be my point on that. Just
to add something to that, one of the properties that we spoke to as we were rolling out this change was mentioning that, they're a seasonal property. So people come there in the winter expecting a warm pool because they have a pool, and sometimes that pool is closed during the winter months for renovation. Again, it goes back to what you're saying, Amy, of making sure that your information is always updated on the property page, and marking it in big bold letters that the pool is out, not accessible during the months of XYZ, maybe even including it in your room rate details so that if people think that they're getting a hotel with a pool, it kind of gets reinforced along the way as they're doing their booking. So yeah, very much so. Keep those details up to date, not just on Booking.com, but wherever you're placing your rooms, your availability.
I'd like to ask you a question. Where does my most value lie? In my price competitiveness or my review, or is it a perfect balance between the two? Where does my superpower lie if I want to get the deal?
I think it's a bit unique to each property. You're always going to have travelers that are only looking at price, only looking at the cheapest option. You're always going to have travelers that are going to be pickier and want specific things once they get to their destination. And then the rates always depend on who your competition is. I would say we have perfectly good hotels at a rating of 5 that still get booked all the time because of their location. If a traveler really needs to be 2 blocks away from the best tourist spot or the home of their friends, they will still book a hotel that has a bad, what do we consider a bad review or a lower review score. So it really depends on who the property is trying to optimize and attract to their property, right? The rates and stuff, I think it needs to be, competitive. Again, it depends on who your competitors are and how they set their prices and how you play that game. But I would say figure out who your sweet spot is and which types of travelers really enjoy your guest experience, and then play that balancing game between rates and guest review score. Like I said, I'm always impressed when I see hotels who have very low review scores still perform very well on our platform because of whatever reason, their location, who knows, but they still kind of bring in that demand. So figure out what works for you and experiment.
I think what you can do, Leanne, from a feedback perspective is look and see what your ideal guest is for your ideal for that property, and make that marketing message speak to that type of guest, and then understand those local competitors. That's why we have revenue management systems and things like that. But what revenue management systems often don't do is take into the account the online reviews, because you're just comparing rates. So use your competitor data from a review point of view and go, okay, to be competitive right now, this is their price, this is their reviews. Our reviews are better, so we're gonna, slightly be more expensive. It then won't impact your occupancy, or it shouldn't. So it's about a whole load of different things, right?
And what's very interesting is in terms of the hotel management agreements, they're now adding online reputation management as one of the KPIs in terms of the performance of the property. So if that is a key metric in terms of my ROI on the asset that I've invested in, it's, and if that's worked into your management agreement, then it's really something that we should take a lot more seriously. And I love the fact that, I'm so excited to finish this call and get on the phone with my teams and say to him, I have re-looked at this completely different. Reviews have always been, I've got a review, I've now got to respond to it, right? Then it evolved to, okay, how do I use this as a management tool? Now, after this call, after the discussion we've had, how do I use this as a revenue tool? How do I use this as a revenue management tool? Right? This is the next evolution of reviews for me, and it's incredibly powerful.
I think hoteliers went through that stage where it's like, oh my God, I don't like online reviews. They're a pain. Like, should my guests, how can they leave reviews online? And that's like 10 years ago when I first started out, right? Like you mentioned TripAdvisor, it's a bit like Marmite. They either loved it or they hated it. The majority of people hated it. And we've seen that change, like especially with the conversations that I have with hoteliers about reviews. But they are so important. Your OTAs like Booking.com and now your shop windows, because potential guests don't always land directly on your website. They're looking at spaces where they can get an honest opinion and make an informed decision on where they're going to spend their money. Whether you love OTAs or hate them, they have a position in your business and you should utilize them to the best of your ability. You know, whether it's getting the first guest to come in and then you're converting them to repeat direct bookers, because if you're not being proactive and cleaning up your online reputation where you can and making sure that story's correct, they're going to book with your competitor. And Booking.com doesn't mind where that gets booked because they're going to book through them anyway. So, you know, you just make sure the story's correct.
Yeah, I like your advice there, and I like that it comes, you know, from a perspective of someone that's looking at the industry and behavior and what's best for the property, right? I do want to go back to something that both you and Leanne mentioned, which is kind of the idea of this general manager that walks the grounds, really interacts and is people focused. When we were running this pilot, one of the chains that we partnered with was Radisson, and their loyalty person was kind of venting to us that, you know, I really want my general manager to not be in the back office playing with the Excel spreadsheet of how these reviews will work and what the number will be. Like that's not. I can see why that's important because it's a KPI. I need to understand how it's changed, but I don't want that to be the core of what he does. So I think it's also us trying to incentivize and promote partners that do spend the time to make sure that the softer touch, the human-centered stuff is there, because quite honestly, that's the thing that people remember from their trips the most. It's the locals, it's the connection you made, it's having a great recommendation from the front of house folks at the hotel that told you, you know, you should really go to this restaurant. It has the best pizza in Napoli. You know, things like that are the ones that stick in people's minds. And if a general manager is focused on that experience, the guest reviews will follow. I can assure you almost 100%.
Yeah, and I think we've looked very narrowly at online reviews. Like your online reviews impact you operationally. A GM should not be looking at online reviews through a spreadsheet. I hate spreadsheets, guys. Get a system. You know, the system is going to be so much more powerful because you can actually segment it by your different categories. You'll understand your sentiment. You'll be able to say, okay, in room 3, we need a new mattress. 10 guests have complained about that. Let's make an operational decision so we spend our revenue in the right areas. So don't think it's just online reviews and the importance. Online reviews are important to your guests that are going to book. The information that they give you can impact every single decision you make in the hotel, from, you know, what linen do you buy, who is the best staff member. You know, use your feedback to be more powerful than just online reputation. Use it operationally, use it from a revenue standpoint, use it to understand where you're sitting within your competitor set, and make sure you're always keeping it update. Like, ask the right questions in the surveys. You know, don't be frightened to change it up because you're not sure what your guests are experiencing. Ask them about it.
I love that advice. Very, very practical, very down to earth. I love it.
Leanne, have you got any final notes that you would like to pass on? Any top tips or anything like that?
I would like to ask the top tips from Rodica. If I can do 3 things today that you would look at my brands and say, you listen to what I said, this is going to have an impact. What are the 3 quickest wins that I can do as a hotel operator?
First and foremost is make sure that that guest experience is top notch, whatever that means for your brand, for your property. Second of all, try to avoid having a bad review, because it is an important KPI, but also think of it as from the perspective of you catching that feedback that can help you, like Amy was saying, operationally figuring out how to optimize that guest experience. So it kind of goes back to 1. And then lastly, I think being a good host, beginning to end. So much like you were saying, Leanne, with your experience at your properties, you kind of think of it as being the host or somebody coming to your home. You're doing it at check-in, you're doing it throughout the journey, you're doing it at the end. Really make sure that that whole life cycle is looked after. And if you do, and it goes back to that guest experience, and I think that's, if you give me one thing to focus on, I think that would be my one thing. The other two are sort of derived from it. If you get that part right, and it's true to who your brand is and to your what your property stands for and the kind of host you want to be, then I think that's the most powerful thing that you can invest in.
Thank you, Rodica. I love that. That's my takeaway. What kind of host do you want to be? Right. I love that. That's the message I'm taking away here today.
And also, I just wanted to ask you one question. I know the answer to this, but it was a question that came up in the surveys quite a lot. And it was, can I influence the rating on Booking.com in any way by paying a higher commission? So I'm going to let you tell them no.
I was honestly quite surprised to see that, right? Because what we're trying to do, and hopefully all the systems, the rating systems that you're participating in, what they're trying to do is provide that transparency between the experience you're providing and what a traveler should expect. So no, we don't do that today. I can't promise you that we'll never do that, but it doesn't seem likely based on the values that we're promoting into the marketplace. It doesn't seem fair to partners, and it doesn't seem fair to travelers. I don't see Booking or really any other system giving you levers like that to play with and influence your guest review score.
The other one that came up was, does adding stricter cancellation policies impact revenue? And I think what you're going to say here is that, you know, pick this up with your account person at Booking.com. Am I correct there, Rodica?
Yeah, it sounds to me like the answer would be quite specific to a property in order to be helpful. And account managers that we have on our team can bring the data that we know that we can share with you and look at that together and really make some decisions jointly. It's not the type of question where I can give you an answer that's fit for all. Not in a way that would be useful to anyone. So really encourage you to look at your account and your property goals with your account manager if you have one.
And then there was just one final question. Is Booking.com ever going to let the hoteliers review their guests?
Now, that is a very popular question. I will definitely say that. And it actually comes more from home properties, right? Where sort of the Airbnb model has had this history of setting up trust by reviews coming from both the property and the people staying there. We have no plans to institute that anytime soon, but it is one of the things that we hear about the most, especially from the segment of sort of smaller or home properties. So we do hear that. We are aware of the request. No news today, but keep your ears to the news that we share in the marketplace and to the emails that we send out. If ever we're changing that, we will let you know about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, from me, it was an absolute pleasure having both of you on the call. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope everybody that's watching gets some really good tips from us. So I don't know if Leanne or Rodica, you want to say anything as final snaps?
Thank you to partners like Booking.com and like Guest Review for facilitating this discussion. You know, to get around the room and have a frank and honest discussion and learn from each other and have takeaways that we know will be taken back to our various teams, just allows the professionalization and upliftment of the entire industry. So thank you to partners who are willing to get around a table and Back of House Banter. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Rodica?
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Leanne, for the awesome questions, and Amy as well. Really excited to continue the conversation. Like I said, it's just the first steps in kind of changing our system and trying to make it more fair, but also empowering partners to take a better control of their guest review score. And hopefully I'll be back and as soon as we have more news in the future.
You're always welcome on Back of House Banter, guys. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will chat